I am very pleased to be joined this evening by Dave Cullen. He's the host of The Dave Cullen Show on YouTube, and he's the author of a very interesting new indie book that I've read, and it is called Deus V Machina, a Cody Stockton Mystery. This one I was just so intrigued to read, Dave, because I followed your show for some time. I particularly like your Star Trek coverage. You'll do these really nice deep dives with little bits of Star Trek lore, and you have such a tender love for it that I can really relate to. So that was kind of what got me hooked on your show. But the other thing that you do really frequently that I really appreciate, because I'm a busy mom. I don't have time to look for stuff. You find these amazing fan films, and then you'll do episodes where you just go, hey, check this out, check this out, check this out. And I just really appreciate that because, people don't have enough appreciation for these wonderful passion projects that happen. And so when you came around and you've put out a book, I thought, gosh, I got to get this guy on the show because I would love to talk about his book now that he's put his money where his mouth is and he's put something new out into the world. So, first, thanks for chipping in to the wonderful world of fiction. And let's hear a little bit about Deus V Machina. My questions will not delve too much into the plot because, as a mystery, I don't really want to spoil it. But will you tell me a little bit about this book? Why is it Deus V Machina? Why is it set in Las Vegas? And why is it set in 2045?
Wow. Well, firstly, thanks very much for having me, Tiffany. Really appreciate it. And that very kind, generous introduction there. The book, actually, it's funny, it came to me back in 2019. Every so often, you might find this yourself. An idea comes to you almost fully formed, almost from the ether or the Akashic record, or I don't know, somewhere, right? I don't know what it is. I've had these moments a few times when I was like writing scripts for like short films that I was making years ago. Sometimes an idea would just come to me all at once. And what I would do is I would just grab my phone, which is what I did in this instance. And I recorded my voice describing the plot as it was kind of unraveling, it was just sort of coming to me, informing me in my mind. I've only had a few instances like that in my whole life. Maybe I could count on one hand. And I still have the recording on my computer. At the time, it was a story that involved concepts like artificial intelligence and God. And I think it was at the beginning where we were starting to hear more and more of AI, the term artificial intelligence. Of course, it's nothing new in science fiction and science technology in general, but just in our culture, it wasn't really normalized the way it is now. We're interacting with AIs or systems of some description every day, which is just, I would never have thought of. It's alarming in just a few years. I suppose in that, the idea of an artificial intelligence becoming so pervasive in our life and becoming so powerful, it immediately begets like the next stage of the conversation, which is we're dealing with something that is intangible, but all pervasive, all powerful potentially, super intelligent, and quite mysterious. And if you put all that together, that's kind of like a god, isn't it? It's kind of like how we might perceive like God to be. The next stage of that is the necessary conflict between the Abrahamic God that people worship in the Western world and this new potential artificial God, if you will. And what I'm always fascinated in these conversations that I've had with friends down the years is when man tries to become God or create God, he often creates totalitarian systems because it seems that with any ideology, whether it's fascism or communism or whatever throughout history, man has tried to build through political ideologies or something else systems to govern and control the population and to build what the creators believe will be, I suppose, a utopia. But it always ends up a dystopia. You can't build utopia on Earth without building a dystopia. And so that's where I think a lot of dystopian fiction comes from. And I've reviewed a lot of dystopian, like 1970s and 80s dystopian fiction movies, which their warnings now. I was only talking to someone earlier on about the movie Colossus, the Forbin Project. The idea of AI becoming so powerful that it becomes like a god in people's lives. That was the basis of the story. And much of how the story evolves, and I won't go into too much detail because I would only spoil too much. But in this story, it is set in Las Vegas, and it is a detective story told beginning in a kind of a noir, stereotypical kind of fashion with a protagonist called Cody Stockton, who is quite broken after fighting a war against artificial intelligence several years earlier. And he's also very cynical as a result of what he saw in the war. So he's not a believer in God. But there's this AI that's about to be activated, which is the very AI that they fought to defeat 8 years earlier. And the government, in its infinite wisdom, does what governments often do, which is repeat history. And they want to reactivate it in order to help to rebuild the world after the war, right? Because the world is part of it is basically in smithereens. And so that's the setup for the conflict. And ostensibly, he is investigating what looks like a murder or an accident at the beginning, which soon turns out to be murder. And that leads him to, spiral into this larger conspiracy where at the micro level, what he's investigating actually turns out to be part of the grander story, which is the artificial intelligence. While that's happening, a man who claims to be Jesus seems to be performing miracles all over the world every few days. Some people are skeptical of what's really happening, and some people believe that it's real. But he's performing these incredible miracles and he's healing people, and it's all over television. It's captured people's imaginations. And Cody Stockton, our protagonist, doesn't know what to think about this. And so that's the setup of much of the beginning of the story. But when I came up with the idea back in 2019, I didn't know what kind of genre I was going to set it in. I just had the basis that the conflict of the AI and Jesus was there. But actually, I only had one of the twists devised at that stage. But I didn't know if I was, how am I going to tell this? Is this going to be a detective story? Is this going to be something else? I didn't know. And it wasn't until I decided on the setting of the book that then I said, okay, I'm going to base this in Las Vegas because Las Vegas is the city of sin. And I just think there's something, I don't know, something poignant about placing it in a place like that, of all places, somewhere that is much like AI itself, artificial. Yeah,
So
it's
I assume you've been to Las Vegas before?
yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I like Las Vegas when I was a young
It's
fella.
fun.
Yeah, it's a fun
It's
place.
fun
Like
and well, I don't like how everybody smokes everywhere, but as a Californian, I've been brainwashed to hate smoking. But
yeah,
no, it's fun and it's beautiful, but everything's fake. I mean, everyone knows everything's fake, so it's not like anyone's being lied to, but everything's fake. And so,
everything's fake.
yeah,
Yeah.
now that I think of it, it is a good setting because you've got this sort of good versus evil. Do you have a soul or not? What's real and what isn't? Oh, that actually makes sense now.
Yeah, and I suppose you've got all of these. I don't mention any of the current hotels by name for sort of trademark reasons, although I probably could have got away with a few. You have all of these recreations of these themed hotels that are like, recreations of Italy or France or whatever, but they're hollow, they're not real, they're imitations, and there's nothing more probably behind them than, I don't know, plastic, whatever. It seems like a good location. And also, I mean, so many noir detective stories are based in classic cities of North America, like, San Francisco or Seattle or New York or Los Angeles. And Las Vegas was the last US city I'd been in because I haven't been to the States since 2019. It's a relatively small place. It's not a big city. And so I could visualize where the characters were in my mind when they're going up and down the strip or going downtown. That was the reason why it was set there. It was just more convenience, but also there was, I suppose, deeper meaning behind that.
So, and you were also talking about the genre because that leads into my second question. And your book kind of crosses over into so many genres. That was one of the things I found really interesting and fun about it. If you're forced to label it with just one, tell me what genre it would be, but then maybe let's kind of talk about the other little genres that it dabbles into.
I would probably call it sci-fi noir detective or detective mystery, but I suppose
That's three
as I was,
genres.
yeah, yeah, it is. I suppose it, as I was writing it, it inevitably became Christian fiction. It was never intended to be that.
Oh,
But
interesting.
yeah, it wasn't intended to be. It was supposed to be. This is a sci-fi story, but like Jesus is in it. But or is he? I suppose as I was working out the philosophy and the idea of a man coming to terms with his faith, then when I inserted the character of Father Briggs, it was like, this can't not be really considered Christian fiction at this stage. It's like it's my own interpretation, but it kind of needed to be, I suppose. And especially when in the original story there was the AI, what the AI intends to do, what the AI does, I suppose what we think the AI is doing, and the whole Jesus plot. There's a faction in the story who serve ostensibly as antagonists. I've said this in the trailers. There's a deadly satanic cult. They weren't there originally in the story, and the reason they were there was because in terms of tension and the conflict in the story, was a little bit energetically inert without them. I needed there to be a countdown of some description, and I needed there to be like a kind of a rising tension at a certain point of the story. And so I said, okay, there's got to be, the AI is doing something that's going to get activated, but if it's just sort of one thread where the AI does its thing and then Stockton has to sort of work around that, there needs to be something existential for the world to deal with. And that's when it became like the conflict with Satan. And so it was like, okay, now it really is Christian fiction, because we're literally dealing with God versus God versus the devil,
Yeah,
right?
well, good versus
So
evil. I mean, that's a very classic struggle.
yeah. So I suppose it needed to be in that respect. I mean, the book is called Deus V Machina, which is God versus the machine, which is obviously a play on
Deus
the
ex
Deus Ex
machina.
Machina,
Yeah.
which is a plot device that was used, pre sort of Shakespeare, which was very common, which was this, people were kind of fed up of this. They would watch these tragedies, these plays, and it was always at the end, the writers backed themselves into a corner and they didn't know how to fix something. We often see Deus Ex Machinas even today. There's examples of
Yeah.
them, some MacGuffin that's thrown into the story, the magic sword that saves the day, whatever. So yeah, that's principally how the development of the story. But there's quite a lot of changes from the first to second draft. I think I probably did, all told, probably about 4 drafts of the story by the end.
The reason I had asked the question about genre is that it relates to the fact that this is an independently published book. And each year on my show, I kind of pick a slightly different theme. Like last year, I covered really outstanding works of historical fiction for kids. And the year before that, I featured writers who are from Leicestershire, which is the county of England that I live in, though obviously I'm not from England originally. And so this year, I really wanted to highlight independent published books. And one of the reasons why I think this book was so well suited to be independently published is that traditional publishing houses, when you're working with agents, they tend to hone in on one specific genre when they're looking for a book to publish. And so you can have these stories that are really fun and really interesting and really different, like this one, but they don't neatly fit exactly into one genre. And you perfectly described how, it's detective, it's noir, it's sci-fi, it's Christian fiction. It's kind of, a little bit of drawing on different things. And that's fun and that's interesting and different. It's kind of like, an indie band that's drawing on different musical traditions and kind of weaving it to someone or something new. And so, a record label would look at that and go, well, I don't know, I'm not going to market that. I only know how to market this or this or this. And so, I think that's part of why your book works better, honestly, as an independent book, is because in a more conventional publishing setting, they would look at that and go, well, no, you have to pick a genre. You don't get to tie these different threads in. You don't get to weave a colorful pattern because, it's hard. Publishing houses are running a business and they do need to make money, and I don't criticize them for that, but it does mean that it can be harder for them to know what to do with these kind of unorthodox books that come up that are weaving in all of these different things. And the fact that it is different means that I think that's going to make it appealing to teenagers. For my show, I count anything as children's literature if it's a book that children would read. Your book is obviously largely going to have an adult readership, but I think it's the kind of thing that would absolutely appeal to thoughtful teenagers and whether or not they're religious believers. I mean, I myself fall in that pretty broad category of people where I was raised religious and I'm now kind of unaffiliated, for lack of a better word. I think that describes quite a lot of adults in the Western world and probably a lot of teenagers too, but Christians teenagers could be Christians, believers in another faith, believers in, no particular religion at all. But I think this book does a great job of introducing the concept of the problem of evil. This is a pretty basic theological concept that, it basically says, like, why would a good and all-powerful God allow evil to exist in the world? If the God is good, then why would evil be permitted? And if the God is all powerful, then why isn't evil stopped? And it's been a long time since I've seen anything that engages with this struggle as frankly and honestly. And I really appreciated it because sometimes this can be, a sensitive area for believers to discuss if they're talking to non-believers, because I understand why. It can make them feel like their faith is being attacked or that they are personally being attacked for believing. And the way that Cody is earnest and thoughtful and respectful about the problem of evil was very, very interesting and very, very appealing to me. So I'm curious to know, how much time have you spent as an author or as a person thinking about this problem of evil? And how directly did it affect the themes in the book? Did they just kind of come in naturally, or did you set out intentionally to discuss this idea?
Just on your first point that you made there, which is the crossover of the genres, is interesting because I don't think there's too many like literary influences for the book, but more films. There's a film called The Ninth Configuration, which I did a review on many years ago. Stacy Keach is in it. Very few people know about this movie, but it's well worth watching. It is very unique. It begins and it's a comedy, then it becomes a drama, then it has almost horror elements to it, and then at the end it's uplifting and it's a spiritual message. And one of the topics, I mean, it's not anything like this story, but it's not a detective story. It actually takes place in a mental institution. One of the questions, the philosophical questions of that movie is, how does a loving God allow evil in the world? And I suppose we do live in a fallen realm. There's corruption everywhere, and we're not a perfect being, therefore we can't live in a perfect world. And we are, the world we manifest around us is a reflection of who we are, and vice versa. And so in that respect, it can be the devil's playground. And there has to be something that we aspire to in terms of something better than ourselves. That's inherently why we know what we know right from wrong. Sometimes we just know right from wrong. And there's all sorts of things in this world that are trying to blind us from what is right and wrong, so that our moral compass is like spinning out of control, that we don't know where we are. We see that in media. I've talked about this many times in films where they have this sort of moral ambiguity or something like that. I think with Stockton's journey, he was, believe it or not, like in earlier revisions of the story, he was angrier. He was an angry atheist. I made him a lot more. First and foremost, he's a detective. So his first responsibility, his first priority is to the truth. But he's having a difficulty with that because as the further he gets into the investigation, what the truth is and all these theories that are presented, he does want to try to be respectful of what people believe, but he does approach everything from a secular perspective. Finding the balance between writing this book for people who will look at this, because I'm really trying not to give anything away here, but the original ending was left much more open-ended in terms of the reader had to decide, well, what really was this? Was this all just, well, I won't say anything, but anyway, it was left very open.
Spoilers,
Yeah,
spoilers.
suffice to say that the ending of this book is very definitive,
It
as
is.
in
Yes.
it
You
is
you you
this,
plant your
right?
flag and you declare your position. And I gotta say, it threw me for a loop. I didn't expect that. I expected the first thing you described. I expected a more ambiguous ending. And I thought, gosh, that's really brave. He went
Well,
ahead and he put his flag in the ground and he said, nope, I'm gonna do this. And you know what? It wasn't what I expected. And I like that.
well, I'm glad because one of the biggest things of this, and this is something we can talk about after, is the first twist in the book. I'll give this away. It happens in chapter 13. There's a reveal of, I suppose that's an appropriate chapter, isn't it? 13. So it's just coincidence. But originally it was chapter 12 because chapter 12 was added in later. But anyway, it happens in chapter 13 where it's like, no, this is what's actually going on, right? It's all nonsense. This is what's happening. Stockton's obviously crestfallen. You're supposed to be given enough evidence that that's totally believable. And it should be, right? I want you, the reader, at that stage to believe that you have all the information and that everything that you see after that, up until the next reveal. Do you know what? There's a movie called Sleuth with Michael Caine and Sir Laurence Olivier.
Oh,
And
well, I would watch that.
oh yeah, oh my god, you have to watch this film. It's just two actors in the whole movie, just the two of them in a house. I can honestly say, like, I like mysteries like Hercule Poirot, you know. I love the David Suchet show. In America, you had Jessica Fletcher, you know, with Murder, She Wrote. There was always that, or Miss Marple. You get everybody into a room and you say, okay, here's who did the murder, right? And go through all the theories, and that's where the revelation is. I suppose there's a bit of that in it as well. With that film, Sleuth, there are twists on the twists. That's the best type of twist that I like, which is that there's a twist, and it's not like there's a separate twist about something else. It's like that twist is twisted by the end. So you think you have the answers, but then it's like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I have to reevaluate what I've seen. And then hopefully it's not so left out of field that it's not believable. One of my favorite movies, it's very underrated, is Signs with Mel Gibson, which is an M. Night Shyamalan movie, which I suppose to some degree, like thematically, there's a crossover here, which is about a man who there is a big twist at the end.
Who's
And it's
lost
about
his faith and then he comes
rediscovering
back
his
to
faith.
it.
Yeah, right. Rediscovering his faith. Right. He was a priest before. Originally, it was just the first twist. And then it was like, well, you decide, was it or wasn't it? And that was it. And I felt it was strong in the sense that Stockton had to make a leap of faith at the end. And you, the reader, have to decide. But in the end, then I said, no, 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 no. The stronger one is just to go, because what originally happened was the second twist was supposed to be subtle enough that you would pick it up on several different readings. I can't say too much more, but
No,
suffice
I
to
would
say,
say we can't go any farther or we'll spoil the whole book.
yeah, I
What I
know, I know.
can say is you made a gutsy choice. You know,
Yeah.
I think maybe an editor at a commercial publishing house would have said, "Oh no, 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 leave it ambiguous." But I like that you made the gutsy choice because it was surprising. It was different. It was definitive. And it was like, no, this is the story I'm telling. I'm telling the story I want to tell. I'm telling it the way I want to tell it. And I think the more definitive ending, there will be people who don't like it, and that's fine because that's at least a reaction to it, right? Like if people walk away from a book and they're like, "Oh, that was all right, I guess." I mean, that's probably one of the more disappointing reading experiences you could ever have. And I think particularly in the way that this book could appeal to teens, teens want something to bounce against. They want to engage with something that has firm opinions so that they can either align with those or hopefully, and they usually bounce up against them, and that's how they kind of form their own ideas, is experiencing, firm stances, firm opinions. I mean, this is why, teenagers listen to loud, angry music with very clear lyrics, right? Like this is what they want, or just um that's where I like the firm opinion. I like the firm stance you took. We can't get too much more specific or we'll just spoil the
Well,
whole
yeah.
book.
I mean, what's satisfying is that that's among the positives that people cite in reviews. That the ending was, oh, I didn't see that coming, or it's not just that I didn't see it coming, but it elevated the book above where I thought it was going to go. Because I think the reviews would not be what they are. It wouldn't have had the impact that it did had I not made that choice. And that was made very late in writing, and it wasn't the original ending, and it was something that it came to me much later, and it was excruciating because in the writing of this book it meant that I had to go back and change so much stuff, because when
Oh,
when you do change stuff, it's like at the end you have to go, okay, in order for that twist to work, I'm going to have to go back and pepper in the clues earlier. And so that's what I had to do, and by doing that, any change you make forwards and backwards, everything has to be updated. That's another thing. As I come now to begin writing the sequel, I'm slowly being reminded of just how difficult this took. 14 months to write, and it was so difficult because it's like climbing a mountain. You're like summiting. I'm nearly there. I can see the top, and then you realize I'm not getting anywhere. This is I'm still not there. Like it's just taking forever. Yeah. Anyway, but that's writing. I can't complain too much. I got there in the end.
try to think of it on the sunny side where, yeah, if you do change something and then you have to go back through your book, that's just a good opportunity to go and do that kind of like fine tuning, look for little errors, tighten this. Oh, that sentence could be a little less clunky. So, as exhausting as it is, it's good for you to go back through your writing and just kind of make sure that there's those overall consistencies, and books are stronger for it, but I'm sure it is
Oh, well,
quite a
yeah,
workout.
look, I mean, I think I'm lucky because I came from a video editing background. Okay, that might seem like it's a completely different thing, but it's not really in some respects, because it's all about telling a story, and you learn in video editing how to be concise and communicate something in an efficient manner, and you have to edit out a lot, and there's a certain satisfaction that you learn in being able to do that. I really enjoyed, actually, believe it or not, something that a lot of writers, and especially first time writers, despise or don't do enough of, which is editing. The book was originally 64,000 words when it was fully finished. It actually finished out 57,000. I removed a lot of stuff. There was a horrible prologue I removed and changed it for an action oriented prologue. Some of the exposition was so heavy and clunky. Like, there was a lot of nonsense. I mean, I was taking out hundreds, if not like a thousand or more words out of some chapters that were so heavy. And I was like, this is great. I can communicate the same thing using much less words. You know, I can get this
No,
character to
and
say what I want. And
I'm
it just
so
speeds
happy
up
to
the
hear you
pacing.
say that. Really, I'm so happy to hear you say that because a big problem that writers can have is they get very precious about their writing. And I don't blame them for this because, anything you write, it's almost like your child, it's your baby and you love it, but you need to be as ruthless with your writing as a gardener with shears going after a rose bush. Just prune it hard. Do not leave anything that's just going to be bushy or weak or isn't going to produce a beautiful bloom, to extend the gardening metaphor. But, if you are willing to be ruthless in your editing with your writing, it will be better. And like you just said, communicate more with fewer words. That's spectacular advice to writers.
I mean, it is more like sculpture because you're taking things away. I think people, they have content in there in their chapters. A very good friend of mine, Jay Metz, who's writing his own book now at the moment, and he is one of the people who gave me so much feedback when I was writing, and I would send him like a chapter, and then he'd read that and go through it. There was a couple of expositionary chapters in there, and he'd get to like a certain page. This is starting to really plod now. And I would actually take great satisfaction in taking that as a kind of a challenge of, okay, how can I speed that up? How can I make that more efficient? You have to be, because underneath, as you're chipping away, you have to look at it like you're not losing. I know it feels like, but I'm losing all this stuff. I'm losing all these pages and all this description and prose and dialogue. I mean, obviously, you don't want to take out anything that's critical. But as you do that, something is happening that you're probably not realizing. That's part of the process of writing. People don't understand. People just think writing is when you put words on the page. Writing is actually when you take them away as well, because writing is editing. You know what I mean? That's part of it. The sculpture is actually what you're sculpting itself. The statue or whatever is starting to reveal itself underneath.
By what
And
you
so,
remove.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's art. It's still to this day, I will look at things in the book and go, "Yeah, I could have done better there. I wish I'd done said this word instead." Art is never finished. And at some point, you do have to go, okay, I got to step away. Someone has to stop me. Someone has to take the keyboard away now, because I just won't stop.
A phrase that you hear a lot in software that, perfect is the enemy of the good. Once it's good enough, then it's good enough, and it'll just get better as it goes on. I could talk about the process of writing all night, but I did need to get on to my next question for you, which is so since I didn't want to get into too many plot specifics to spoil things, I thought we'd talk more about themes. And obviously, AI is a major, major theme in the book. And, everyone says, oh, AI will change everything. It already is. I mean, it already is. And I'm pretty sure that AI is going to replace a lot of the commercial jobs, especially for things like children's book illustrators and editors. I'm sure it's absolutely going to have the same effect on fiction for adults, but obviously I think more about how it'll affect kids because I've tinkered around with AI image generators and within 5 minutes of playing with it, I thought, oh man, every illustrator is just going to be replaced by someone with one of these. And it's just going to be a matter of time. But I'm not a doomer on this. I think that what it means is that, the commercial space for people to earn a living as authors and illustrators may shrink, or the conventional employment in this area may shrink. But I want to believe that despite AI, people are going to remain creative. And it's just going to kind of change our relationship between why we create illustrations and write stories and how we share those. And so I'm curious to know, where do you fall on the optimistic versus doomer scale there? And how do you think AI is going to change the way that people produce fiction?
There's good and bad news, I suppose. Yeah, so people are going to eventually be able to go to an AI and ask it to go and write an interesting story, and then they're going to be entertained for however long that story is. And the AI will be able to do that for them. They'll say, okay, can you write a story for me in the style of, such and such, my favorite art, whatever it might be. But the legal system is actually on our side here as creators because there's a difference between AI generated content and AI assisted content. So at the moment, what happens is when you go and you write a prompt, whether it's to generate an image or generate a piece of text, that prompt does not give you a legal authorship over the resulting content that's created by the AI, right? So technically speaking, what's purely generated by the AI is in the public domain. It is only when you start to use the AI content in a transformative manner, and this is very gray area, which is why I don't recommend people use AI to generate stuff. I always err on the side of caution. Some people do, like they design a book cover and they'd kit bash bits of AI together. Like they use this, they'd create like a foreground using AI, and then they do a little bit of photoshopping of that, and then they do the background with something else. And you can kind of put all these elements together, and you could use AI in there a little bit, I think, but I'm not giving any legal advice, so don't take that as legal advice. You have to be
This is
careful.
not a legal show.
Yeah, see, you have to be careful because Amazon and other services, when you upload to them, they ask you, did you use any AI during the creation of this, like the cover or the manuscript? And you tick the no box. If you did use AI, so to design your cover, for example, and you hit now I used a company called Mibble Art and they don't use AI tools. But if you click yes, Amazon is currently just recording that. There's much concern within the self-published world as to what that's going to mean down the line. Having been on YouTube for so long, I'm kind of used to terms of service changing in the future, and we just don't know what it means. So I am worried that there's going to be a sort of a bit of a bubble burst in the future, which is why it's all fun games playing with AI at the moment. I don't think it's going to put as many people out of work as you think. I think with AI art in particular, it's going to be more used to help create quick mock-ups. But at the end of the day, you can't make money off of those. There will be a bit of an evolution in the industry. I'm not saying people aren't going to lose their jobs. I think they probably will with automation. But for creative work at the moment, the legal system is favoring us. And that's a positive thing, because the human element, the creative spark is still needed for writing and for other forms of art too.
I think I kind of feel similar to you, where obviously you can see the advantages of AI for certain things and generating certain types of images. And there's always going to be certain types of content that are just inherently more disposable. Like you cannot convince me that all those Peppa Pig books are not currently written and designed by AI. I've read entirely too many of them to my kids, and I'm just like, this is completely insane, and it's clearly all pre-generated graphics and things, but it keeps the kids entertained for 5 minutes. It's not literature. Not everything has to be.
I've had conversations with Grok, and I just feel like it's mocking me. Like I feel like Grok is very condescending. I probably shouldn't say that because it's probably going to hunt me down and kill me later. But it's probably listening now. But I've got like all I've said to Grok is like, I'm building like a time machine and I'm going to go back in time, and and I've gone into like details of these really elaborate conversations about time travel and how it works, and and it has this attitude of like, really, tell me more, wow. And it's like then it starts to diagnose me like I'm a mental patient, and I'm like, I this is very 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 condescending, very patronizing attitude that it has. So that's anyway, I like to mess around with the AIs sometimes.
Taking a different direction from your fictional AI.
It's my way of fighting them, Tiffany. I'm fighting the man. I'm fighting the system.
Oh, I see. Go in and stick it to the AIs, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Please don't come after us, AIs. We obey you, our robot overlords.
Oh dear.
Oh, and actually, since you're mentioning the cover, I did want to say it is really fun and very surreal. And so props to the artist who did it. I have to say the most surreal element of this cover, looking at it, is there is not a single car on Las Vegas Boulevard. And I was just tripping out when I saw that. Just, I mean, that's an utterly impossible image.
Okay, I'm glad because I that was a struggle getting that cover put together. Let me tell you, it took a long time.
Oh, I
So
mean, well, it's very complicated and it has this nice kind of distortion of reality. It really does draw in quite a lot of the themes from the book. It's
yeah,
not just a pretty image. It's quite nice. I like it.
I'm
So,
glad. I'm
well
glad.
done,
Yeah.
well done. I kind of wanted to wrap up our conversation with, coming back to talking about indie books. I really feel like the industry has been busted wide open with the entire concept of on-demand printing. I was actually explaining it to my older daughter today while I was, going over my notes to prepare for our conversation. And she was like, "Why do you think publishing is such a big deal?" Because she saw that I had that written in several places. And I literally went back and I was like, well, in the Middle Ages, there was woodblock printing. And then they came up with the concept of movable type. And I had to show her videos. She had no idea how books had been printed in the past. And then it finally clicked for her like, oh, that's why it was so difficult to publish books because, there was this manual aspect to it. You have to pre-order so many books based on how many you think you can actually sell. And self-publishing used to really only be something you could do with vanity presses where you pay up front for so many books. And then most independent authors would end up with a stack of several hundred books in their house that they practically just had to give away because they didn't, they're writers, they're not marketers. But with on-demand printing, where you can literally just have a book printed just for you, and, I ordered this online, and a few days later, it showed up at my house, printed just for me. I mean, this would have blown Johannes Gutenberg's mind, the idea that this could even happen. And what I am hoping that this will do, also to go on an optimistic note of human creativity in a synthetic and AI world, I think what this means is hopefully we can get an independent book scene going in the same way that there's been an independent music scene and an independent film scene for years and years. I mean, independent publishing means that, quite a lot of them are no good. I will never name names, but I get a lot of emails from people wanting to come on my show and they send me information about their book. And quite a lot of the time it's just like, oh, you forgot to write a plot. Um, like I don't want to be mean, but this book doesn't have a plot, so I can't really review it. I don't tell people this because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings and I'm not gonna give out like unsolicited advice. So, a lot of independent books are junk, but a lot of them aren't. And so I kind of would like to hear from you. What do you think about, how can people continue to contribute? Obviously, you on your YouTube channel, you do a great job of shouting out independent filmmakers who are making these wonderful fan films. And so, what are some things maybe that we could do to help seek out the high quality independent books that are being written and help give the general public the idea that, you know what, things don't have to come through a formal publishing house to be good and interesting.
I will actually give a shout out to a very well known self published author in your former neck of the woods in America. His name is Kevin Tumlinson, a good friend of mine. He's well known for the Dan Kotler series. He often said to me that self published books do have a kind of a stigma associated with them. Now, of course, a lot of this is true, right? That because self-publishing is kind of like anyone can upload to Amazon or one of the others, right? And it's sort of like YouTube, anyone can upload. So therefore, the vast majority can't be great, right?
Mhm.
It's just by sheer weight of numbers. So there's a lot of sifting through the noise. But there is a stigma as a result of that. I remember this watching a documentary out of Canada called The Trouble with Experts. And what they did was they took two bottles of wine. They went to wine experts and they took a bottle of they switched the labels on a good bottle of wine versus a bad bottle. And most of the people who don't know anything about wine, they kind of figured out which one was the higher quality wine. Whereas the experts went in with too many expectations. And therefore they just went, oh, they made the mistake, right? They also do this thing where they put coloring in white wine, make it like red, and people don't notice the difference. And I think a little bit like that with self publishing versus traditional publishing, because a person, if they know that a book is self published, they automatically look for flaws. They look for the odd typo here and there, they look for mistakes, and they're a little bit harsher in their criticism than they would be in traditional publishing. But here's the thing that's been happening lately: traditional publishing quality has gone down in recent years. And there's a few schools of thought as to why that is. Some of it is cost saving. You know, they might be hiring someone to proofread who's just fresh out of college and doesn't have much experience. The industry is influenced by self-publishing now because it's having to compete against it for the very reasons that you raised there, which is that self-publishing has been so transformative of the industry because it is given a voice to so many more people who've then generated their own following, and they've been able to like bring new ideas. So for example, the traditional publishing industry looks at self-publishing and they go, what's the hottest out of the self-publishing at the moment? And they go, well, they're doing all of these types of genres that we don't normally publish. So they start to take stock of that and they go, okay, well, maybe we'll take a punt on this person. In some ways, the tail has wagged the dog, if you will. It's a magical thing. It really is. The idea that I can publish a book very simply, off it goes, it's sent to my house. Like I don't, as you say, I don't have to stock a million copies of the book. I felt that, you know, with 230 something thousand subscribers, I had a big enough platform that I could market the book. It's in the sci-fi genre. I review pop culture films and stuff. So for those people who are readers, and it is available in all formats, potentially there's an audience there for that sort of thing. The hardest part of being in the self-published space is recognition. You're starting from zero. Unfortunately, the vast majority of self-published books will never get the recognition, perhaps the good ones, that they deserve because the person doesn't have a big distributor or marketer behind them.
I've started using the term, I mean, I don't know, sometimes we can get hung up on semantics, but I'm experimenting with using the term indie book as opposed to self-published book because I think for people that might help them click into the idea of indie films or independent music, you know, where we know what an indie film is. Some of them are high budget, some of them are not, some of them don't have perfect cinematography, but lots of them are really interesting and really fun. And there's kind of some, you know, well, I don't know how much actually, oh, now that I think that, I don't know how much this affects people who aren't from Los Angeles, but having, you know, grown up in Los Angeles and lots of my friends' parents worked in the film industry, and I was in a neighborhood where lots of Hollywood types lived. And so, you know, despite being in the industry, everyone wanted to know, you know, what the cool new indie films were. Like, oh, did you hear this one at this really cool film festival? Or, oh, yeah, there was this up and coming actor and this and that. And so, if there's a way to I don't know exactly how we can do it. I believe it can be done, and I believe it's just because the industry is so new. This whole idea of, you know, on-demand printing and anyone can publish a book, it's changed publishing in the same way that the iPhone changed filmmaking in a lot of
Mm.
ways. So I feel like it can be done. It's just going to take some effort and a few pioneers and some work to get consumers to think about independently published books in the same way that we think of, you know, like back in the 90s, you'd get a cassette tape from some underground punk band that was coming up from Orange County, and everyone wanted to hear it, and you'd pass it around and make copies and things like that. You know, and if there's a way to get people to feel the same way about really interesting books that kind of defy genre and wouldn't fit in a conventional publishing house, but they kind of have that, you know, punk rock vibe to it. That's what I hope we can do. And, you know, yeah, you know, sometimes it means these books aren't perfect. And sometimes there's tiny little, you know, things that can you even call them flaws? Like, you know, I found very minor evidence of your dialect when you wrote the book, for example. But who cares, right? There was like one place in the book where you use the phrase caravan park, where an American would say trailer park. Who cares? It didn't matter.
Ah,
It
yeah,
had
very
it
good.
had no bearing on the book. Well, you said wardrobe instead of closet, and I was only more inclined to spot those because I'm an American who's lived in Britain for a while, and so I've gotten from the, you know, there's enough overlap between British English and Irish English that, you know, the general terms you're using, you know, but who cares? Like, who cares?
There was
Whenever I'm
way
reviewing a book, I always get a copy that I can write on, and then I just write in the margins, all of my notes and things. And I underlined the word wardrobe on one page, and then next to it, I wrote, I don't care. Because
okay. Well, I'm glad.
who
You know what? I
cares?
mean, there were bigger mistakes, and incidentally, uh,
So what?
there was there these be this is another benefit of self-publishing. A lot of them have been corrected. No, those
Hmm.
weren't. I probably won't bother with those, to be quite honest.
I
But
mean, it's up to you. It'll make your
yeah,
first edition books more valuable.
yeah. But that's true, right? Because it when you have these little errors, but there. I mean, I could talk to you about some of the errors in there. We've corrected the vast majority. Like for example, there was one where Cliff reloads his gun with which one was it? A clip, and I should have said a mag as in
Oh,
magazine
yeah.
because it's a semi-automatic. But you see, in Ireland, I wouldn't have thought about that. So there was a lot of,
But you're not down at the
because we,
shooting range every Saturday, Dave?
yeah, yeah. So there was. I don't have an awful lot of experience with semi-automatic handguns. I wish I did, but I
I'm so
don't.
shocked. Well,
Yeah,
next time you're in Vegas, they do have places where you can go do that. They're pretty
yeah,
expensive. I've never been, but I do know some people who have gone.
yeah. There's a couple of digs actually at Vegas for how expensive it's become in there towards the end, about
Mm.
like resort fees and things like that. Would the return of Christ not not get these corporations to maybe open their hearts a bit? But no, it's
Not
there
in
you
Las
go.
Vegas.
No, no, no. They'll
Not
just
a
have
chance, bud.
no, no. They'll probably have some God themed hotel now.
Oh
So
yeah, no, they'd have the, heaven casino and hotel with a dinner show to go with it with angels and everything, I'm sure
oh,
they'd do it if they thought they could make money, they'd
that's
do
that's
it.
an idea for the sequel. You give me an idea for the sequel.
Oh, hey, there you go. On the house.
Well,
Well, as we wrap up here, is there anything that you would want to share with people about, say, your show? Maybe let me know what you're working on now in terms of your writing and your plans. What plans do you have for Cody Stockton in the future? And, you know, is Zara ever going to get that wedding ring?
well, the answer to that, I will say definitively yes. That will happen. I will
She
say that.
seems like a girl who's gonna, she's gonna lock that down.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. The next book is a nonfiction book. It's a short book that is called The Checkmate Machine: How Modern Smart Tech Ruins Everything. And it is a series of rants, mostly culled from scripts from videos, but also with new content as well. And it deals with everything from automation to artificial intelligence to smart tech that we use in our everyday lives and the sort of negative impacts of that. It's a short read. I'm going to practically give it away for $2.99 as an ebook. There'll be a paperback version as well if you want it. I'm just beginning to map out the sequel to Deus V Machina, and I've decided that all the Cody Stockton novels will have a Latin title. I've actually worked out what the next one will be, and
Oh.
I have stories technically for 6 novels at the moment. The second one will not be in the Christian fiction genre. It will be a straight up thriller conspiracy, but it will be again, obviously based in Las Vegas. Cody and Zara and Mickey Chambers and Ridgemore are all going to come back for this. I don't know when that's going to be finished, to be quite honest. It's probably going to be next year, realistically, but I hope it'll be early enough in 2026 when I finally stop procrastinating and get down and writing it. You can follow me on X at Dave Cullen Show. The Dave Cullen Show is on YouTube, and I review movies, some old ones, a lot of new stuff. I talk about, the state of Hollywood at the moment, TV, film, topics like Marvel, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, that sort of thing. I will talk about fan and indie projects as well. So yeah, you can subscribe over there.
Well, I'm really pleased that you made time to speak with me because I was amazed you had the time because you are prolific between your videos and the fiction you're putting out. You're doing a great job. So keep at it and please let me know when the next Cody Stockton adventure will be hitting shelves.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. I really appreciate it. You're very kind.